Welcome to My Life. We are very pleased and honored to have Dr. Joe Mastromatteo with us here on My Life this week. You probably are familiar with Dr. Mastromatteo's name. He's been a long-time Lake Orion dentist. He also has an office in Birmingham. During not the Korean War, but shortly thereafter, during the Kennedy era, he was in the Army Dental Corps, and that was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He's been the junior vice commander of VFW Post 334, also the hospital chairman of VFW Post 334. 22 years ago, Dr. Mastromatteo started the movement for the Veterans Memorial Park in Lake Orion. And of course, that has provided a setting for many meaningful events ever since. He's been the Lake Orion Citizen of the Year in 2007. He even led the holiday parade back then, earmuffs and all, right?
That's right.
And in addition to many hours of his time, Dr. Mastromatteo has donated office space for the Community Coalition for Youth, among other charitable organizations. Thank you so much for being with us, Doctor. We really appreciate that.
It's my pleasure, John.
So tell me, let's talk for a minute about the Veterans Memorial. I know that's one of your favorite subjects. What sparked your enthusiasm for that so many years ago?
Well, I did go to school in Washington, D.C., and it's also known as the City of Monuments. And I couldn't help but wonder about all of these monuments when I was there and what they represented and so on and so forth. But that was just in passing. It certainly impressed me. It has to impress anybody. Right after graduation from school, I went into the Army, of course, to serve my 2-year stint, and I ended up in Korea. And there I was a helicopter dentist. They put me in a helicopter with my instruments and cases and my office, you might say, and I would be dropped off at certain locations in Korea to check up on the dental health of the soldiers.
Now, this was after the Korean conflict, so...
Oh, yeah.
What was going on in Korea? I mean, I know the Cold War was going on and so forth, but in Korea, what was going on at that time?
Well, you say the Cold War. The Cold War was hot. It was real hot. Kennedy and Khrushchev were rattling their sabers. The hotline was invented. They were in tight communication. Khrushchev put in missiles into Cuba, 90 miles away from our country. Kennedy objected bitterly. He even quarantined Cuba with a fleet of warships. And at that point, Khrushchev changed his mind and took the missiles out and prevented a catastrophe. We were terribly close to World War III. Very few people realize that.
I remember seeing those bulletins on television, Walter Cronkite, etc., back in those days.
Yeah.
And how frightening it was to hear them announce that they're about the fleet doing what it was doing and the missiles.
Sure.
And so on and so forth.
You bet.
I think everybody was ready to crawl into their underground shelters at that time. It was so scary.
That's true.
But please continue.
Well, and then after returning home, I originally lived in Mount Clemens, graduated, went to school there, and I wanted to settle a little bit away from the family because my wife was from New England, and instead of settling in New England, we settled in Michigan, but I thought to make her feel more at home, I would put a few distance in between my family and start a new life.
I want to talk more about that. But
go ahead.
May I ask you a question about I want to go back to the Veterans Memorial for a moment.
Okay.
I believe it was it 1992 that all that got started?
93. September 93.
Okay, what was it that happened in 93 to get the ball rolling with that?
Good question. I was a member of the Orion Area Chamber of Commerce, and I was a member of the board of directors of that chamber. And we didn't have anybody who would step up and take the beautification chairmanship And I finally raised my hand, and they thought, well, what are you going to do to beautify the area? And
That's a pretty broad subject.
That's true. True. I mean, I thank God for the ladies' organization that put beautiful flowers on lampposts and things like that, and it beautifies any community. But I told them that was not my idea. They'd have to get somebody else for that. No disrespect to the ladies. And I wanted to build a war memorial in honor of the veterans of our area, of Orion, Oxford, and the surrounding areas, our immediate area, of course, and of our nation.
And that turned out to be no easy task.
And of course, if you suggest something like that, you better be ready to be the chairman, because that's the way it goes in those kind of meetings, as you know. But I was ready. I was ready. After my stint in Korea, I became very aware of all the sacrifices that were made by our military, and I got into history going back to George Washington and the Revolutionary War, and so on and so forth.
Was it easy to get a lot of people to help you out for that?
They were interested, but they didn't know which direction we had to go. I mean, none of us built a memorial before, and you can imagine doing something from scratch with no experience in that vein. We had all kinds of different ideas of how to do it, and so we had to start right from scratch. You're absolutely right.
Did you find out there were a few more rules you had to follow than you figured out, or at least rules you had to find a legal way to get around?
Yes, that's true. And fortunately, one of the attorneys came up to me at a meeting right after we started. We announced it in September '93, but we got going the spring of '94. And we met at Children's Park, if I recall, and a group of us, Joanne Van Tassel was there. She's always been just intensely interested and full of energy for the memorial. God bless her. But Greg Cudella, at the end of that meeting, was in the crowd, and I didn't know him. He came up to me, and he said, "I'm an attorney, and you probably need an attorney for something." And he says, "I'd like to volunteer my help." And I said, "Thank you. I'll be calling on you." And I did, and as we found out, Greg was tremendously important. And to this day, he helps us with the legal and stuff of it.
And you know, the more veterans I talk to in our area, the more I find out that there was a lot of that went on in regard to the memorial. A lot of people, professional people, volunteering their time and their talents. There were contractors, there were builders, there were who just gave time,
absolutely,
as well as funds to help out the cause.
You know, I had no idea of how to do this, and because of this groundswell of patriotism from all of them, I could go on for a long time and talk about each one of them, but it was so heartwarming, as you could imagine. We didn't have a home. We had to get a home. I didn't know we had to get a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We had to do that, and that's where the attorney Greg Cudella came in again, and we needed an accountant, because you don't want to mess around with the IRS,
right?
And so forth. And all of these things I learned as we went along.
Yeah. We need to take a brief break now, but
sure.
We'll continue on that note with Dr. Mastromatteo in just a moment.
Canine Stray Rescue is Oxford's own local dog rescue. Each year they take in hundreds of dogs and bring them into suitable homes. A certified nonprofit organization, Canine Dog Rescue strives to give pound dogs a new leash on life. To donate, adopt, or even volunteer, call them at 248-628-0435 or go to their website, dogsaver.org, and click on the Canine Stray Rescue League link.
Welcome back. We're back here with Dr. Joe Mastromatteo, Lake Orion dentist, who had a lot to do with the Veterans Memorial in Lake Orion. We're talking about how all that got started and what all you had to learn about it and who all you had to get involved. That's quite a story. You now must be the go-to person for a lot of people who want to do something like that.
A few municipalities have called me, and I was more than happy to tell them exactly how to prevent the mistakes I made, and get theirs started. Two things especially: an attorney and an accountant. You have to account for every penny that's donated to you and what you do with it.
Now, it's been quite a few years putting it all together. A lot of money has been donated. A lot of time and talent has been donated. I know that it's virtually complete right now, but is there more that you want to do there?
You're right, virtually complete. And in that completion, we've added things we didn't know about. But we're happy we did. We added monuments. We added a victory garden reminiscent of World War II. Mm-hmm. Perhaps you were on board and you saw it. I don't know, mm-hmm. But anyhow, these things just happen. Everybody, once they see the beautiful development, then they say, "Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" And we say, "Oh, sure, we'd love to do it. That's $9,000. That's $12,000, and you can raise the money." And we did. We liked their idea. We liked some of the ideas, and we did them. The Purple Heart Monument was one example. The Medal of Honor Monument was another example, and so forth.
I have to ask you, getting back to your role in VFW Post 334, you are the hospital chairman. What does that mean?
I have to account for all of the hospital equipment that we have in storage for any veteran that calls upon us that would like some help, such as a wheelchair, crutches, things of that nature.
Well, that's interesting because not everybody knows that sort of thing is available through the VFW.
That's correct. That's correct, and that's one reason why we do try to get the word out by word of mouth, by inviting them to come see our post, which is, by the way, we have a wonderful post. We have active members that are just incredibly good for the whole state of Michigan.
And as with any other organization, you can't do what you do without funding. And we are now, as we record this, we're approaching the holiday time of the year. Mm-hmm. And I know that you folks have some things going on to help with all that. Could you give us an idea of some of the things that are going to be coming up?
Well, we tie in with the Oxford American Legion post. There's an American Christmas party for the children, and that's a wonderful occasion, making dozens of kids very happy with Christmas gifts and food also, by the way. That's one thing we have in the way of ceremonies. We have a Pearl Harbor ceremony at that post right here on Drainer Road in Oxford, and we're one of the few memorials, by the way, that has a ceremony for Pearl Harbor.
Really?
And it's a wonderful ceremony, and we have a dinner at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be the first Sunday in December, I believe, even though that's not Pearl Harbor Day, but it's I think Pearl Harbor Day is Monday this year.
Mm-hmm.
But you might want to come, John.
Yeah, I might.
Bring your family.
Veterans Day is coming up too, and I know a lot of your folks are going to be visiting schools and whatnot.
That's correct. We try to make our veterans available to anybody that wants to hear about the travels of the veterans, what was involved with our government, and so forth, and history, our history, which is so vitally important. They're teaching very little of it in our schools nowadays because of other curriculums that leave no room for the history of our country. It's not uncommon when a veteran goes and talks to students that they're just overwhelmed with questions, and we can't believe it because we would think that ordinarily they would know a lot of this stuff.
I want to talk about Dr. Joe Mastromatteo now, his life. Tell us a little. I know we're talking about this a little before we started recording, but you were born in Detroit.
That's correct.
Whereabouts?
St. Joseph Hospital, somewhere in Detroit. That's all I know. I was there at the time.
Tell me a little bit about your parents.
My father and mother came from Italy. They were immigrants. And I'm first generation. And they came here to America because the economy was very bad in Italy. And of course they came in the late 1920s when the roaring 20s were just terrific. We were just experiencing a wonderful, wonderful economy.
Things were looking good there for a minute, weren't they?
Little did they know that only lasted about 8 months before October of '29 hit them, and the stock market collapsed, and they were on their backs.
What did your dad do for a living?
He would do anything. He only had about a third grade education, but he had the spirit and the willingness to work hard, like most of those immigrants. Mm-hmm. And
did he come over with a lot of your relatives? At the same time?
No. He came over he came over first when he was a kid of about 16 or 17, and then years later he married my mother, went back to Italy, married my mother, and then they came back again. He was there in the early 20s, so he came back in the late 20s, so everything was just the way he thought it would be, just a bustling economy, but little did he know, of course, that October 29, the stock market crashed. They were out on the street practically.
When he came over at age 16, did he come over with his parents? Or?
Oh, no. He came alone. Don't ask me how, but he came alone.
That had to be a big decision.
Oh, yeah.
So he came and then went back to Italy. What caused that?
Good question. I presume he was communicating with my mother, and how that came. It was just a small village, as you can imagine, and
so he went back and married her?
He went back and married her, and promised her a better life by coming to America.
So whereabouts in Detroit did you folks live?
They lived in Melvindale, which would be south of Detroit.
Okay.
Yeah, and he would do any kind of work. He worked as a dishwasher in a restaurant. He got a job at the Ford Motor Company at the Rouge plant, sweeping roofs. Of course, the immigrants would get the worst jobs, naturally, and it's probably no different today.
Okay.
But be that as it may, they'd put food on the table and he could care less.
Yeah. I want to pick up on that in just a moment.
Okay.
We have to take a break. We'll be right back with Dr. Joe Mastromatteo.
Take off your hat, throw it in the corner. Take off your hat, throw it in the corner. Take off your hat, throw it in the corner. I don't see why. Stay a little longer. I'm talking about Boozoo. Woo! Boozoo, that's who. Oh, yeah. Hey, oh, yeah. Come on down. Stay a little longer.
I'm Connie from Connie's Kitchen here on OCTV, which is channel 99 on AT&T and 191 on Charter. Join us here on OCTV, join me in Connie's Kitchen, and learn to have fun in the kitchen, to relax and enjoy yourself. Come on, what'll it hurt? You'll have a good time.
Back with Dr. Joe Mastromatteo, talking about your early days in Detroit where you were born and what your father's occupation was and so forth. Basically, he did whatever he could.
That's right.
To put food on the table.
That's right.
Did you have many brothers and sisters?
Oh yes, I had 2 brothers, 1 sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did your mother work outside the home at all?
No. She was quite busy raising the family, and they lived in from what I gathered in Melvindale, they lived in a very small apartment, and somehow they left Melvindale and they moved to Mount Clemens.
East side.
I don't understand how that happened, nor did they tell me much about that.
Were you very young at that time?
Oh gosh, yes. I was born in '34. I wasn't living at that time. My older sister was, and older brother were, but I was born in '34, right in the middle of the Depression. And we were living in Mount Clemens, I believe, at that time. Maybe not, but somewhere's in there, as you can imagine. And a strange thing happened. There was an old couple with a corner grocery store. They liked my parents so much that they must have worked out some kind of a land contract or something, because they wanted to retire, and we ended up with a grocery store. Well, my mother ran the grocery store while Dad was working for the Ford Motor Company on the assembly line. And pretty soon, the grocery business got so good that he had to quit his job at the Ford Motor Company, I'm told, and take over the store. And we lived right at the store. The living quarters were attached to the store.
So things turned a lot better, didn't they?
They sure did.
Yeah. Did you ever know your grandparents?
No.
You didn't.
Good question. Good question. And I went to Italy in the '60s to catch up on my lineage, but I never met my grandparents. They were all dead.
Did you find other relatives over there?
Oh yes. We found my father's sister, older sister, my mother's older brother. They were there, and of course I couldn't speak Italian. They couldn't speak English, but we loved knowing the fact that we were all one family.
Sure.
And they were in hard times, as you can imagine. After World War II, they were in hard times for about 10 or 15 years. Their economy just chugged along at a slow rate until finally it took off.
Let's come back to this country and you're growing up. Where did you start school at?
My parents put me into Catholic school, St. Mary's Mount Clemens.
And if you were in a Catholic school
that was a big sacrifice on their part. You can imagine.
Sure.
You can imagine.
Okay, so back in that era, you would have been taught probably by nuns.
We were.
What order did you have?
The IHM, Immaculate Heart of Mary.
From Monroe.
You're right.
My hometown.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. All right.
I used to play hockey with the postulants during the wintertime back on their pond.
Oh my. Good for you.
But anyway,
good for you.
This interview is with you, not with me. How did you find that, going to school with nuns? I mean, remember, this was back in the day when they could carry yardsticks and
That's
use them.
right. That's right. I never knew of an incident, by the way, where they slapped somebody with sticks across the wrist, or the stories that you do hear. Perhaps that's true, but I never saw it at our school.
Well, you know, it's like your father's strap. It was more of a threat than anything else.
That's right. That's right. The discipline was definitely there, and that's something that we sorely miss these days, I'm sure. But it was very good to me, and it provided me with a wonderful preparation for college, even though college wasn't in my plans at the time, going through high school.
What was your favorite thing to do back in those days in grade school?
Well, when you remember, we have a grocery store that was open 12, 13 hours a day. When the rule of the house was, when you get through with school, you come home and you go in the store and you work in the store for the family. and which I did. And of course, I always thought the other boys and girls were out playing, and I was poor me. I had to work.
I would think
But-
maybe in a way you'd be the most popular kid in class because they knew where the candy was and who to go to.
You're not wrong there. You're not wrong there. And at lunchtime, they say, "Hey, Joe, what do you got in your lunch there?"
So what was your favorite thing to do, though, back in those days? Did you like playing
Oh, I love
baseball?
sports.
You did, okay.
Oh God, yes. I couldn't play enough sports. My father and I were always arguing, and I wanted to go out and play. He says, "No, you got to stay in this store. This is busy. After 4 o'clock, people come home from work, and they got to be waited on. We got to put the stock up on the shelves and all of that stuff." So I couldn't participate in the sports, especially football. I loved football.
What were your thoughts about going to high school as you went through the 8th grade? Did you know where you're going to go, or?
No, we didn't talk much. Well, I went to high school at the same school.
Oh, they had a high school there as
They
well.
had a grade and high school then, yeah.
Did the IHMs run that as well?
Oh yeah, the IHMs were there too. Yeah.
Were you finally able to play sports when you got into high school?
My junior year, I was playing football, the love of my life, and did pretty well. And senior year, did well. We tied for the championship in our league, and that was great news because we had never done that before.
Who was your biggest competitor? Do you remember?
Schools out of Detroit, St. Catherine, St. Charles, schools like that, which also are closed. The high schools are closed, I should say.
Were you able to get into Detroit for anything then?
Detroit was a long ways away, even from Mount Clemens, because cars weren't that plentiful, and we didn't have cars to speak of in high school. I think many families at that time in the late 40s, early 50s had one car in the family, and most of the mothers didn't drive. We forget about that.
What was the most memorable thing about living in the Mount Clemens area back then? Anything come to mind?
Oh gosh, yes. I worked at the mineral baths hotels. We had about, I don't know, 8 mineral baths hotel. They were world famous for their healing effects of arthritic people. People would take 3 weeks of these mineral baths. Under the city were huge deposits of sulfur minerals. Smelled terribly like rotten eggs, but people would come anyhow. They would brave it, and they would take 3 weeks of these baths and come in crippled and be walking out at the end of 3 weeks. So that was quite impressive.
It worked so well they don't do it anymore, huh?
That's right. Well, they found out it really was just temporary. But be that as it may, it was the big thing in Mount Clemens. The high school, the public high school, the nickname was Bathers after the mineral baths.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, back in those days also, Selfridge was a regular Air Force base.
Oh yeah, Selfridge Air Force was famous, absolutely famous. They had air shows and everything there.
Yeah. Well, this concludes the first half of our visit with Dr. Joe Mastromatteo. I'm pleased to say that Dr. Joe is going to stick with us so that we can record a second episode, and we hope that you will join us for that. Dr. Joe Mastromatteo. We'll see you next time on My Life.
Hi everyone, don't forget you can purchase DVDs of your favorite shows from OCTV, whether it's Minutes by Minute, Our Community Access, or Connie's Kitchen. Just call the station. Our number is 248-628-9658 and enjoy watching all of our shows on OCTV.